Hey, what is up guys? Calum or Calum's Fish Tanks, and in today's video I'm super excited to show you guys the setup of my 45P behind me. Currently I am doing a dry start method, which if you want to learn a little bit more about, make sure to stay tuned till the end of the video where I'll talk a little bit more about it. But for now I'm going to leave you guys alone and let you guys sit back and enjoy the scape. So it's been 2 weeks since I've planted this dry start tank, and now I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about why I decided to do the dry start and why it may be helpful for you guys, as well as a little bit of a pro tip at the end. I'm not really going to explain how to do it because I found the video I did kind of shows it. It's super simple. You just add your soil, you spray it down, and then you literally don't even need to plant your plants. You may have noticed, but I just threw them in and now they've all taken root in here. It's super lazy, super easy, and that's one of the reasons I love it, but I'm going to tell you guys a couple more. So why do people use the dry start method? There's lots of advantages to it, but probably the biggest is it gives your plants an opportunity to settle in before you have water. It's really useful specifically for carpeting plants. That's what most people will use when starting up a dry start method, and that's because the carpeting plants can develop roots and root themselves in so they won't float up when you add water. This typically happens a lot faster when you do a dry start method because your plants have access to all of this CO2, which is one of the most important nutrients for growth in our plants. The essential part of the dry start is giving our plants this head start before we add the water. Water isn't necessarily our plants' best friend. Most of these species come from unaquatic growth. They grow on the sides of shores. They're rarely fully submerged underwater like they are in our fish tanks. Water makes it a lot more difficult for them to survive. For one, there's less CO2, which is super important for growth, and number two, they're going to get a lot less light through the water depending on how high your tank is. The water will refract the light, making it so less light gets down to the bottom, and then there's less light for our carpeting plants specifically, and that's why people usually start with these. The other enemy to our plants when we add water is algae. This is something you don't really need to worry about with the dry start method, and it makes it a little easier to get started and hopefully get a full carpet before you fill up the tank to really limit the chances of you getting algae and it being something you have to deal with early on in the starting stages of your tank. The second biggest pro of the dry start method is the fact that it can cycle your tank, especially if you use aqua soils, things like ADA or Tropica. These kind of soils will release ammonia when they're submerged in water, and what happens is you have a layer of water in the bottom of your dry start method. This will allow bacteria to start forming and taking care of that ammonia, so during the dry start method you're basically also cycling your tank while growing your plants extra fast. So it's super useful for that and lets you add fish basically right after you fill it if you let it dry start for long enough. This tank's a 45P, being about roughly 10 gallons, and I really need some fish suggestions for when I'm done this dry start method, so it'd be really helpful if you guys drop some down below and let me know what you want to see, and subscribe if you do want to see what I eventually put in here. Now with all those pros, you guys are probably thinking, what are the cons? Well, the first one and the biggest one that turns the most people off is the need to be patient. The dry start method, to do it properly and to get the plants really grown out, typically takes 6 to 8 weeks. And a lot of people can't wait that long to get their tank filled up, and I totally understand that. But it would really be worth it, especially if you're trying out new plants that you don't know for sure you'll be able to grow. It will save you a lot of money, and I'd recommend trying it for sure, but that's the biggest deterrence for most people when they're thinking about doing the dry start method. They just want to get it full of plants and full of water right away, which I completely understand. The second biggest con is that the plants are grown submersed. That means if you're not using CO2, you run a risk that the plants will melt, and especially after waiting 6 to 8 weeks, you don't really want that risk. The plants are used to having a lot of CO2, and then when you add water, it can shock a lot of the plants, causing the melting, which is obviously not fun. And the final little con is there's a chance of mold, but I'll talk a little bit about how to get rid of that at the end of this video. So why did I decide to do the dry start method? I'll be completely honest, and usually I just don't have the patience to do it. I want to set up the tank right away and fill it with water, but this time I decided to do the dry start method for really only one reason, and that's because I didn't have all the plants ready for this tank. All I had was the carpeting plants, which are the ones that do best in the dry start method. So I've decided I'm doing the dry start method until I get more plants. I'm not going to do the full 6 to 8 weeks to get the full carpet. I'll probably do it for, a couple more weeks, maybe a month or so, and then when I get my plant shipment in, I'm gonna fill this up and record another video for you guys and show you guys how I planted the whole thing, and then maybe it'll be grown out a little bit by then, who knows. Now, I promised one little pro tip for dealing with mold, which can be an issue with the dry start method. This is typically caused by really hot temperatures and too much water in the tank. This will cause the mold. You don't want to fill the water line up over your plants because this will cause it. What I've seen a lot of people recommend is using hydrogen peroxide. What hydrogen peroxide does is kills all cells. It is an oxidizer and will kill basically everything, the good and the bad. So I don't recommend doing this because you could end up killing spots of your dry start, which wouldn't be great and can cause more problems. What I would recommend doing is getting some springtails. These have become a lot more available locally in the hobby since they've become so useful in bioactive vivariums. These are great decomposers and will also take care of any dying leaves as well as all these pesky molds that plague your dry start. Anyways guys, I hope you guys enjoyed this video and learned something new. It was a super fun one to make and I can't wait to continue updating you guys on this tank when I get the plants and finally fill it up. But anyways, make sure to leave a like down below. This was Calum's Fish Tanks. Peace.